Good afternoon, everyone. I always regret interrupting the great networking that goes on at these events, but we must get on with the show. So first of all, I want to welcome all those who are joining us from the working group session. So some of us from the institutions have had a fairly lengthy day already, starting at 7:30 this morning. So I want to welcome folks from the working groups, but I also want to extend a special welcome to those who are attending the first part of the conference right now for our keynote address. We've had a busy day so far with some thought-provoking discussions and also some discussions amongst the institutions on charting the future course of Polytechnics Canada. So welcome to everyone. I was also asked just to say, because there's many people on social media, and I want to remind folks that we do have a hashtag. It's PolyCan, hashtag PolyCan 2016. Is that right, Robert? Yep, I got the thumbs up. So all of you that want to tweet, especially when you're hearing our keynote speaker today, by all means, please use that hashtag. So we begin the afternoon portion of the agenda with a session featuring one of the most prolific thought leaders on the future of education. And we're very pleased to have Michael Horn back at Humber. So Michael Horn was here, last spoke at Humber in 2013 when he introduced us to the best approach to disrupting class education and learning. I thought disrupting the class was throwing paper airplanes, but I think he's talking about something else. So we're delighted to have Michael back and have him here to talk to both the college and our Polytechnic partners from across Canada about his latest thinking on how we can integrate new discoveries and mentor students in ways that disrupt the traditional mode of higher education. And we know that our Polytechnic model of education is challenging traditional paradigms, and many of the conversations today and tomorrow are focused on that theme. But first, please let me introduce Rick Heibrix, who is going to introduce Michael Horn. Rick is the Managing Director of Digital Transformation and Industry Solutions, Cisco Americas. And Rick leads digital transformation, business development, and sales acceleration at Cisco. His team provides innovative and business-relevant solutions to priority industries such as manufacturing, healthcare, real estate, and smart and connected communities. Rick is a big supporter of Polytechnics Canada. We had the opportunity to meet a few months ago in Ottawa at our national strategy group, and we met with many federal government politicians and decision makers, and he's a great supporter of our cause. Prior to joining Cisco, Rick was co-founder and CEO at Edificum and executive director of the Center of Design Informatics at the Harvard Design School. So Rick continues to be a faculty member at the Harvard University Design School. He's the executive in residence and chair for the Building Automation Program Advisory Committee at George Brown College, so shout out to George Brown, and serves on the Industry Advisory Board for the Mechanical and Industrial Engineering Department at U of T. Rick is also a founding member on the Evergreen CityWorks Leaders Council. Please join me in welcoming Rick Heibrix.
Yeah. I was just thinking that my introduction was longer than what I'm going to say here. But thank you, Chris, and thank you, Humber, for allowing us to be a presenting sponsor at your conference. I'm here with some of my colleagues. I think Dan Madden is here somewhere, and Tom and Keith. And we are here with all of us, not all of us, we have more colleagues that couldn't make it, but we love the Polytechnics. You are incredibly relevant for us and to us, and we hire a ton of people from your programs, and our customers are hiring a ton of people from your programs. We live in a world that is drastically and rapidly changing because of digital transformation and technologies, and that means the education needs to adapt and keep up really with the changing demands of the work of the employers in Canada. And that's why we love your mission, and that is to create highly qualified and skilled workers for Canada's employers. And we are one of them, and as I said, our customers are one of them. So we encourage you to keep doing your amazing work, and we will continue to do our part to support each and every one of you, because we think that there has to be much more attention going into the Polytechnic system, and we need much more skilled workforce that can really help us in this digital and new world. So it is my honor, and it's very kind of apropos, I guess, to introduce Michael Horn. And I didn't meet Michael until just earlier, and I'm just reading his bio, and I'm thinking he needs no introduction, because if you don't know Michael Horn, I don't know what you're doing here, to be honest. He is co-founder of the Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Learning, so you must have all read his book, How Disruptive Innovation Will Change the Way the World Learns. And that is about looking at new and innovative ways of how learning, teaching, classroom, everything really is changing, and you are at the center of driving that, and that is going to deliver the next generation workforce that is going to make Canada a lot more productive. So Michael has obviously tons of expertise, includes disruptive innovation, online, blended, and competency model-based learning, and is very focused on student-centered learning. And today, he's going to guide us through some of those disruption and concepts and how it will disrupt and change the Canadian model. And as I said, you're right at the center of it, so I'm confident we're going to not only learn a lot and taking away a lot from this that will help continue to shape Canada's education. So please join me in welcoming Michael Horn.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, let's get the education thing going. So it's a pleasure to be back at Humber College. I'm really delighted to be here, both just because, as was just said, my sense right now is that industry is changing just a ton right now. What businesses think they want, they don't always know, and the opportunity for the Polytechnics to play a significant role, not just in simply training for industry, but also helping industry, quite frankly, find itself. And that partnership, that cooperation, I think is a significant opportunity, not just in Canada, quite frankly, but to have colleges like this throughout the world, I think is increasingly important to the vitality of our societies. And so to be a part of this couple-day conversation, you get to hear from my friend Jeff Salingo tomorrow, I believe. I think you're part of a really, really important dialogue right now for the future of Canada's well-being, but more generally, again, I think we're really talking about how we fuel growth and prosperity and quite frankly, civic society's health in the future worldwide. What I thought I would talk about today, for those of you who heard the lunchtime talk that the Deputy Minister gave, he sort of stole my thunder in some ways, but also provided a great platform talking about disruptive innovation and sort of how it's affected the broader workforce and landscape just in terms of how industry has changed itself. And so what I thought I would do, if you'll permit me, is geek out just a little bit and go pretty deep into the theory of what is disruptive innovation itself. It's a phrase that you hear all the time in Silicon Valley in the United States, where I'm from and used to live. You would hear entrepreneurs all the time say, we're going to disrupt this, we're going to disrupt that, and most people misuse the phrase pretty consistently. So I thought we would just go very deep into what really is disruptive innovation with some industry examples well outside of education, just to really understand the principle and the theory itself, how it's playing itself through the broader economy, because I think that has huge implications for the sorts of training and how you think about programmatic design at the Polytechnics. And then we'll switch into how it's actually changing education itself. And there the conversation will be twofold. One, what these disruptive innovations that we see emerging in post-secondary education more broadly enable us to do as we think about transforming pedagogy to reach each and every single student that comes through the doors of your colleges, first. And secondly, how the landscape is actually in some ways threatening to colleges, universities, post-secondary education more broadly worldwide. Who are the new players? What are they doing? How are they, quote unquote, unbundling higher education? And then thinking about some of those new players that actually can be really significant helps and aids to all of you as you think about keeping your education system up for the demands of this 21st century and this model to really stay up with the time. So I'll sort of play two angles of that, both some of the players that I think are emerging that are threatening in much of the world. I'm not personally convinced that they'll be threatening in Canada, but we can talk about why, maybe during the Q&A. And then secondly, again, some of these new players that could be actually tremendous helps to all of you as you lead and pioneer that innovation. So that's the basic plan for the talk, and then hopefully have some opportunity for a good conversation both in the Q&A and afterwards during the reception. So I'll start with a little bit of a backdrop, which is, I think you heard from the Deputy Minister, for those, again, who are at the lunch today, but really worldwide we're hearing this growing chorus questioning post-secondary education's quality. We're asking, what do people actually learn in their programs? How do we know? How do we move from governing inputs to actually thinking about outcomes? This was a study done in the United States that showed a shocking number of students go to higher education and, quite frankly, not only don't learn much, but actually regress in many ways in their learning over their 2 or 4 years in a given program. And then I think the bigger factor from my perspective is this one, the job mismatch paradox that we hear a lot about worldwide right now, which is that employers are saying that they have millions of job openings worldwide for which they cannot find qualified employees to hire. And at the same time, we know millions of people who are looking for work and would love to get into the workforce in a meaningful way. And this mismatch of people looking for millions of jobs and yet not millions of people looking for jobs is just something that I think post-secondary education has to be at the solution of and has to help solve right now. And that's the opportunity, I think, in which we're functioning, but also the threat that's giving rise to some of these new players in post-secondary education that I think in some ways are potentially threatening to colleges and universities as we have known them. Now, against that backdrop is this concept of disruptive innovation. So what is disruptive innovation? When you hear that phrase, I don't want you to think of, it's funny actually, you mentioned that disruption you thought of as throwing paper airplanes in class. When I wrote Disrupting Class, I think a lot of my middle school teachers felt like I had finally written my autobiography. But what we mean by it is a process that transforms industries that are characterized by things that are complicated, expensive, inaccessible, and deeply centralized, such that only a limited few people can partake of their benefits, and transforms it into products and services that are far more affordable, convenient, accessible, and simple, such that those people now have access to them. And they start as pretty primitive, but they get better and better and better over time, such that people start to migrate out to these disruptive innovations, and that's how transformation in sector after sector occurs. Now, what's interesting is that when Professor Clayton Christensen at Harvard, when he came to this question of discovering disruptive innovation, he started with this question of, I wonder why successful companies fail. Okay, and it's an interesting question if you think about it, because why poorly run companies or bad companies, why they fail, that's fairly obvious, right? Bad managers, bad employees, bad processes, not market fit, whatever it is. But successful enterprises, long track records of success, great people, great employees, great managers, great processes, why they fail is a lot less obvious. And yet, if you look through the sweep of business history, certainly, but even the history of countries and societies, those organizations that are once at the top, a generation or two later in business are invariably in the middle of the pack or even the bottom of the heap in some cases. And so the question was, why is success so hard to sustain? And he reached, for someone at Harvard, a very counterintuitive conclusion, perhaps not counterintuitive to all of you, but that the very principles of good management taught at places like Harvard ultimately spelled every organization's demise. Okay, so I'll explain through this diagram here. What I've done is, I want you to imagine that innermost circle as representing those people who have the most expertise or wealth in a given field. And that as you go out successive circles, it represents people who have less expertise or less wealth. And every industry tends to get its start in that center circle. And you can describe the dynamics of that industry through this simple 2x2 graph, where you have performance on the y-axis and time on the x-axis, okay? And in every sector, what we see is that there's two trajectories of improvement. The first one is this relatively flat line. This is the pace of performance that those customers inside that inner circle that have lots of expertise and wealth can absorb over time. And the reason it's relatively flat is because the basic jobs that we have in our lives, the problems that we have to solve, they don't change that much from day to day. What you have to get done yesterday is similar to what you're going to tackle today and probably similar to the challenges you'll have tomorrow. Now, of course, there's a range. There's some people at the low end who are satisfied with very little in the way of performance, and there's some people at the high end who, no matter how much you give them, they're never satisfied, right? And you all have the misfortune of either being those people or working with those people. Now, this dynamic exists, and there's a second trajectory that's really interesting. And this is the pace of technological improvement. And what it says is that every technology, when it gets its start, it starts there on the left-hand side is not good enough for the majority of customers or users in a given field. But that technology improves faster than do our lives change. So what at one point was not good enough for the majority of users in a field, over time packs in more and more performance, functions, features, speed, whatever, such that it actually greatly overserves many people in the field, okay? And we see this dynamic consistently over and over again. And what we see is that the march up that blue line sometimes are year-to-year incremental improvements, and other times are giant breakthrough leaps forward. But that these small incremental improvements or the giant breakthrough leaps forward are actually the same type of innovation. And we call it a sustaining innovation because it sustains that trajectory of improvement to build better products and services, to serve more demanding customers, and in the world of business, to often make better profits, in the world of nonprofits or government organizations, to build prestige. Okay? And organizations who are the leaders at the beginning of that blue line are invariably the leaders at the end of that blue line. Incumbents almost always win sustaining innovation battles. And the reason is they're so motivated to serve their most demanding customers and build better products and build better services for them that it doesn't matter how routine the change is or how breakthrough the leap has to be. They almost always figure out a way to get it done. Now, every once in a while, far more infrequently, there comes along a different type of innovation out in the world. And Clay gave this the name Disruptive Innovation, which was a terribly unfortunate name, it turns out, because disruption has lots of other prior connotations in the English language. But what he meant by it was that disruptions effectively disrupted the trajectory of improvement as it existed in that inner circle. And what a disruption did was bring forth a new technology in the form of a product or service that was actually quite primitive compared to the leading products and services in that inner circle. And for all these people we called non-consumers in the outer circle, they didn't have enough money or expertise or whatnot to be able to afford or access the leading products and services. These disruptive innovations that seemed primitive, that disrupted that trajectory of improvement, would bring forth a new value proposition. So they literally redefine that y-axis, that measure of performance, and bring forth something that was more affordable, convenient, simple, accessible, plant itself in these outer circles among these non-consumers for whom this didn't look like a primitive innovation at all because it was way better than their alternative, which was quite literally nothing at all. From there, it would then get better and better and better and better, and over time, what was primitive would become quite good, and the people who were in those inner circles, delighted with their original products and services, as they started to be overshot by the sustaining innovation, they would migrate one by one into the outer circle, delighted by something that was now good enough as it had gotten better, and was, by the way, more affordable, convenient, accessible, and so forth, right? That sounded like a good idea. And historically, entrants have typically won these battles of disruption. For some reason, just disrupting your trajectory of improvement really tripped up the leaders. And so as I mentioned, when Clay entered academia in 1989 at Harvard, the question he brought with him was, why do these successful organizations trip up? Why do they struggle to sustain success? And so just to illustrate this diagram, this is a lot of abstractions up there right now. I just want to tell a story that played out in Massachusetts, where I live now in the United States, in the 1970s and 80s with a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. Anyone work for DEC before I? Anyone? Okay. All right, I'm in safe space. So Digital Equipment Corporation, for those of you who remember, people remember Digital Equipment Corporation? Okay, cool. So they were sort of the leading company of that era in many ways, sort of the Google or the Facebook of the 1970s and 80s. Sorry, this keeps coming off. The 1970s or 80s. And whenever people would look at this company that built, for those of you that remember, mini computers, right, which were about the size of maybe a filing cabinet or that podium there, so not particularly mini, but relative to a mainframe that would fill an entire room, they were mini. Whenever people would look at why Digital Equipment Corporation was so good, they would say, not only do they have the best employees, processes, technologists, et cetera, but these guys just have the best managers and leaders who year over year make the right decisions. They're just the smartest guys in the room. The implication being, if you were just as smart as they were, you would also make great decisions and be great, but you're probably not, so therefore you just can't compete with this great company. Okay, a true story that you could look at Business Week or Wall Street Journal and read these columns and op-eds. So an interesting thing happened, though, to Digital Equipment Corporation, this high-flying company through the 70s, the majority of the 80s. In 1988, 89, within a 6-month time period, for those of you that remember, really quickly, the company literally just fell off a cliff and basically collapsed within 6 months. By 94, it had been sold off for nothing, basically. Okay? Really rapidly. And so you'd go back to these journals that had said these guys were just the smartest people in the room, and that's why they were so good, and say, what happened to them now? How did they just collapse like that out of nowhere? And they'd say, gosh, those stupid managers running the company, very same people, mind you. If they had only seen the personal computer coming, they could have caught the wave, but they missed the personal computer, never invested in it, and therefore they're just going to be consigned to the ashtray of history. So the question Clay brought with him in 1989, same time he entered academia, was not only why is success hard to sustain, but why do smart managers decide to become stupid, right? And that, I mean, it's a silly question on the one hand, but when you think about it, that's often our explanation for failure in society. And yet it did not make any sense here, because it wasn't just Digital Equipment Corporation that collapsed, but it was literally almost every single mini computer business collapsed in unison during that time period. Prime, Data General, Wang, Hewlett, literally all of them. And while you'd expect companies to collude on price occasionally, to collude to collapse was a bit of a stretch of the imagination. And yet that's what happened, right? So something else had to be going on. And if you dug into the story, indeed it was, which was in the 1980s, management at DEC was essentially seeing two kinds of business plans. The first kind said, right now you build these unbelievable technological marvels of this age, these mini computers, and you're able to charge a fair amount of money, $250,000, and get 45% gross margins. And we've been doing what the whiz kids at the Harvard Business School tell us to do, which is to listen to our best customers. And holy cow, they're saying that if you would build just a next generation mini computer, they'd be delighted to pay you $500,000 on 60% gross margins. That sounded pretty good, right? That's good data. Another group came to them and said, you just don't get it, do you? If you just get up outside of your seats and look outside the window, you see there's this thing coming called the personal computer, and I'm telling you it's going to change the world. So management, to their credit, got out of their seats. They saw the personal computer, Digital Equipment. They actually built 4 versions of it and tried to sell it. But they also saw a few other things about those early personal computers. Okay, moment of honesty. How many people remember the early personal computers? Okay, thank you. I appreciate honesty. You don't always get that in the States. Not just because Donald Trump is somehow our nominee. Anyway. So, trust me, I'm more scared than you are. So every once in a while, they'd get up and they'd see these personal computers. And do you remember how primitive those early machines were? They could barely do word processing, right? You had to stop and coax the stupid thing to catch up with your fingers every once in a while so that the letters would literally catch up with your fingers. The basic microprocessor inside those machines couldn't even handle a basic application like that. They would take these machines that they had built, these 4 versions of the personal computer, and they'd bring it to their demanding customers to whom they sold mini computers and say, hey, look what we just built. Will you buy it? They said, not a chance. It can't do anything that we need computers for. No way we're going to buy that. And then they looked at the business plans, which promised that they could charge a couple $1,000s on 40% gross margins in the good years, which were quickly going to collapse to 20%. And so the decision management, in essence, faced was this. Should we build better products and services for our more demanding customers for even better profits, or should we build worse products and services that our customers can't use and will not buy for profits that would kill our business model? What should we do? Right? It's called the Innovators Dilemma. And so they actually did the very logical thing, what we would call good smart management, which was to continue to go up market. For a long time, the signals that the personal computer was growing out there among non-consumers, if you recall, it started with children and hobbyists and people like that who couldn't afford mini computers, far better than their alternative, nothing at all. Didn't matter. But by 1989, the personal computer started to get good enough that corporations and universities could start to use these machines, and whoosh, the volume literally got sucked out of that inner circle into the outer circle, and the volume collapsed of their markets, and the mini computer business just collapsed. Really punishing tale, right? Because data that we always hang on, and I'm just saying this right now because I thought the deputy minister at lunch did a really good job, again, for those of you that were there, that said, you can't always rely on data because by its nature, God created data to only look backward. And so sometimes you got to have a theory about what's going to go forward in the future, or a gut instinct, or a theory that helps you understand in advance of the data what you're going to do. But really punishing tale around this, because Apple came out and the other personal computer companies came out with this primitive product that changed the world, and they literally were incapable of doing it. We see this process play itself out over and over again. I've put up here, and forgive me, the columns are mislabeled, but companies in the yesterday column, who really should have been like many, many yesterdays ago, who have been disrupted by those in the today column, who really should have been like maybe 10 years ago is the way it should be labeled, who you can tell that same story of disruption about, right? So we can go into the automotive business and look at how Toyota, over the last many years, has disrupted the Detroit automakers, GM, Ford, and so forth. Toyota did not start at the high end with the high-flying Lexuses, right? People remember the early Toyota cars that they started with, anyone? Crummy Coronas that rusted quickly, right? Weren't very good, 1960s. And then they got better. From the Corona, they went up market to the Tercel, the Corolla, the Camry, the 4Runner, the Avalon, and then the Lexus. It literally changed the world. If you were sitting there in Detroit, you looked out at those buggers and said, hey, maybe we ought to go out there and compete with those buggers out in that outer circle. And so they'd send out a Pinto or a Chevette. American ingenuity. But in truth, when they compared the margins of selling one of those vehicles with the unmitigated blessing of being able to push out another Cadillac Escalade or a Ford Explorer, it just didn't make any sense, right? So they'd retreat back into their inner circle, push out more of those big cars, gas-guzzling cars, and so forth. And by the time it was really apparent that Toyota had disrupted them, it was too late, and so bankruptcy and bailouts were to follow. Now, Toyota has been being disrupted over the last many, many years as well. Anyone know by whom? Tesla. Interesting. Anyone agree? Do people agree Tesla has been disrupting Toyota? You do? They feel like they come in from the low end? No. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, Tesla is a very interesting architectural change of the automobile. But even before Tesla, Kia and Hyundai, right? The Koreans have been coming into this market. They started the low-end, crummy cars that everyone laughed at. We made fun of the Koreans' cars. And now, 10, 15 years after that, they own the subcompact and compact ends of the market. And now they're winning all the quality awards. And it's interesting. Tesla still isn't, just to address it, Tesla still isn't making a profit, isn't clear that it's sustainable. And yes, they're reinventing the architecture of the automobile, which could be, I wouldn't call it disruptive. It could just be a totally new product, much as the iPhone was relative to Nokia. But if you look at the behavior of all the big automotive companies, they've certainly got their attention, and they all are pushing out electronic vehicles as well. So let's see what happens there. Underneath them, I would expect the Chinese and Chery, Indians and Tata to come up underneath as well. Keep an eye out, right? It's where you don't expect it often is where these changes come from. We could keep telling this story. The one point I want to just make is on how do we survive disruption. And as we've done research, we've seen a couple methods of survival, both of which the Deputy Minister actually unintentionally, I think, hit upon this morning, or excuse me, during the lunchtime talk. And for those that weren't there, just briefly, there was one mini computer company that survived and thrived as personal computers came to dominate. Anyone know who that was? IBM, yeah, IBM, right? And so IBM was the leader of the mainframe world with a business out of New York. Then they set up an independent business in Minnesota to do the mini computers in Rochester, Minnesota. And then they set up an independent business down in Florida to do the personal computers. And in each and every case, they said, we have no idea what this personal computer world looks like, but we're just going to give you the freedom to rethink who you sell to, how you build it, what's important, what's not. And don't worry about us here at corporate. You just figure out what the right thing is and go get that opportunity, because better you disrupt us than someone else do it. And so that principle of autonomy, it doesn't have to be geographic, but that principle of autonomy, freedom from the way we've always done things, from the assumptions of how it's always been, is really, really important as you're pioneering something that may be disruptive. The other thing that he said is, be the best at something that matters. And so this principle, I think, is, I'm not going to go into the whole research here, but that if you really, so IKEA is a great example of this. IKEA has been around for 50, 60 years, just minting cash, and yet all the discount furniture stores that have come in literally have not disrupted IKEA. And my sense is that IKEA is not a discount furniture store. They're a store that helps you furnish this apartment right away today. And they're really good at designing the entire journey through the entire home of the apartment, right? And they have very easy furniture that they actually pay the designers to build for them, that's easy to custom assemble. They're not heirlooms. They're not trying to be. They've never gone up market. They've never gone down market. They've just stayed nailing this job over and over again. And so whatever technology they have to use to continue to deliver on that thing that they do, they just figure out a way to get it done. And so despite all of the changes, Wayfair.com and everything else coming out now in that furniture world, they just keep on rolling. And I think by being really excellent in something and saying, like, we'll use whatever it takes to be excellent at that, has really helped sustain their position. So, and it's not about a product, right? It's about the actual value you deliver to people in the real world. So we call it job to be done. Just wanted to make that point because I think it'll be relevant later, but I think it's interesting to footnote it since the Deputy Minister just talked about it. So interesting questions of where does disruption not apply? Because it does not apply in every single industry. And the example is twofold. One, in areas where there is no non-consumption, there isn't typically a lot of disruption. And I just think the Canadian example is interesting there as we think about the broader post-secondary landscape, given that students aren't paying tuition like they are, say, in the United States, which creates affordability challenges. And so I think how a lot of what I'm talking about, I think it will have huge impacts in Canada, but I think it will roll out differently, potentially, from how it will roll out in other countries. And then the second thing is that industries that do not have a upwardly scalable technology enabler do not experience disruption. I'll give you an example. Historically, in the hotel industry, hotels have not had a technology core that allowed them to take a low-cost value proposition and move up market in a disruptive way. What I mean by that is, in the center circle of hotels, you might have the Four Seasons or something like that, right? For those of you who've been Four Seasons Whistler, it's pretty nice. Marriott, maybe we'd say, is on the next rung out from that. You'd have Holiday Inn came in the 1950s at the low end. You'd have maybe Motel 6 after that at the really low end, right? Something like that. What's interesting about Holiday Inn is that if they were disruptive, when they came in the 1950s, the theory of disruption would have said they came in with this low-end value proposition, affordable hotels, and then we would have expected them to start at the low end and get better and better over time and disrupt Four Seasons, Marriott, whomever. But what's interesting is that they came in at the low end and have just literally stayed at the low end. They have not budged one bit, and Four Seasons certainly has not been disrupted. And our sense is there's been no technology enabler that allows them to take that low-cost, accessible value proposition and move up market without replicating all of the cost features and business model features of the existing top-end hotels. So if they wanted to be like the Four Seasons, they would literally have to replicate all of the cost features of the Four Seasons. Hold the thought. You're jumping the next graphic. So so Four Seasons, right? They would have to replicate the concierges, the high-end spas, the nice restaurants, the people who walk around the swimming pool squirting Evian water on your face to keep you cool. Those things are expensive, it turns out. Okay. Now that's changed, right? Airbnb has come in the last several years with a technology enabler that has fundamentally flipped this on its head, and now the hotel world is experiencing disruption, right? So higher education, though, looks a lot like this hotel industry, if you think about it, right? So at the center, I'm going to use United States examples on purpose, okay? You would have Harvard University, 1600s in there in the center, high end. State universities, these are public land grant institutions in the United States. You'd have your community colleges maybe as that next rung. In between would be state comprehensive universities, which were supposed to be like Polytechnics, but have deviated from mission over time in the United States. And then the next, and so none of this was disruption. You had decentralization, but not disruption. And then my sense is that online learning over the last couple of decades has introduced the possibility of disruption in some pretty big ways across this post-secondary landscape, okay? And fundamentally changed it. I do want to address one thing, though, which is it's not just simply the technology. It's how the technology is used and the model that's put around it. And the conversation I just want to have is around MOOCs. So massive open online courses that started actually in Canada. The United States doesn't believe that, but it did. Massive open online courses, everyone sort of went nuts in 2012, 13, saying this is the disruptive innovation. And my sense is that they're not. And so what I've put up here is just the 6 tests that I think you can ask yourself to say is something disruptive or not. And the first question is the innovation targeting people who are non-consumers or overserved by existing products or services? There I would say the MOOCs get a check, okay? Typically they've been serving people who already had a post-secondary degree who would not go back for another, okay? The second one is the innovation not as good as the existing products as judged by historical measures of performance? Clearly massive open online courses get a check there as well. They were not nearly as interactive or good as a traditional Polytechnic, college, university experience. The third is the innovation simpler to use, more convenient, or more affordable? They were free, and more convenient, they passed that test. Fourth, is the technology enabler, can it carry the new value proposition up market? Here's an interesting question on MOOCs, which is, I'm going to be somewhat provocative here. Yes, they were powered by online learning, but because in most cases the MOOCs were dependent upon faculty members at research institutions that I would argue know very little about teaching and learning, no matter what data these courses generated, the platforms were unable to use the data to actually improve the learning experience in any meaningful way. And so I think they actually stripped out their ability to have a technology enabler that truly allowed it to go up market, because from my way of thinking, it's really online learning combined with the advances in learning sciences that constitutes that up market driver. And I think they basically separated that possibility from themselves. The fifth one is the technology paired with a business model innovation that allows it to be sustainable. MOOCs, by their definition, had no business model because they were free. So they strike out there. And then the third one are existing providers at the outset motivated to ignore the new innovation, right? DEC was basically like, they would look at the personal computer, but it never made sense for them to do it. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, et cetera, they're the ones pioneering MOOCs. So I think they strike out on this end as well, as strictly understood. Now, that said, I think online learning is ushering in a very disruptive phase that has a lot of exciting opportunities. And the first one I want to talk about 3 distinct value propositions that I think are very exciting, that all of you should be thinking about pulling into the learning environments you're creating of the future to match employer needs as we go forward. The first one is personalization. You're hearing a lot about this from people like Mark Zuckerberg now, who's sort of got the memo of the opportunity. But my sense is that personalization is so critical because all students have different learning needs at different times. Some people learn relatively quickly for a particular concept. Other people learn more slowly and struggle with the concept, really wrestling with it. And the reason for this is we all have different working memory capacities, literally the aptitudes in the front of our brains to absorb information in active memory and manipulate it. And we all have different long-term memory, literally different background experiences, knowledge that we bring to a given learning event, which simply means that if I've used the phrase disruptive innovation, for example, without giving context, and you've heard it in an article that improperly talked about it, then the human mind naturally will glom on to its misconception and obsess over that, even as the point of the lesson or whatever else goes on. And so because of these huge differences, if the goal is to optimize every student's learning, which historically it was not for much of education, but if that is the goal, then we need a system that can personalize for these differences. But our current education system was literally modeled after the factory ideals. In essence, we have a system that was fixed time variable learning. We would batch students up in what we call classrooms, much as I have forced you to all come together today in a lecture hall, deliver content. We would test and assess, and then students would progress to the next grade, body, subject, and material, or whatnot, regardless of what they had mastered, and only receive the results afterward. And you hear a lot about data-driven decision-making once again in education. The research is actually unambiguously clear on this point. When you use data in a system in which students and teachers have no ability to take that data and actually do anything with it, it's not actionable, it's incredibly demotivating to the experience and to learning, okay? You contrast that, what this creates, quite simply, the system is what educators call the Swiss cheese problem. All students develop holes in their learning, and the big challenge for you as a faculty member or teacher with many students in front of you is you have no idea which students have which holes. You just know that they all have some holes, okay? And it makes it a very impossible value proposition to reach them all. Now, you contrast this with what we call a competency-based learning system, where the learning is fixed and time is the variable. So we still offer learning experiences for students. We still test and assess because testing and assessment is a critical part of learning. But now we use this to get real-time or interactive feedback, which informs what students do next. And students only move on once they've truly mastered the material, okay? You contrast that, that's a pretty big shift in the fundamental model underlying. And this is a definition of what high-quality competency-based learning is from Competency Works. The basic idea is students advance upon mastery. The only point that I want to bring up here is we're not just talking about basic knowledge, okay? Not just talking about memorization, but also the ability to actually apply it. What can you actually do? The skills and dispositions and application of knowledge. What can you actually do with it? Which has huge implications and potential for the partnerships with industry partners, okay? Now, what's really neat about online learning or blended learning, online, blending into the campus, against this is by being inherently modular, I can move at the unique path and pace that makes sense for my learning, and all of you can learn at the unique paths and paces that make sense for your learning. And we can have this very individualized or personalized experience that both moves us into individual activities when it makes sense, and then into experiential ones when that makes sense so that we can actually apply information and knowledge in projects. Creates huge capacity, in addition, for students to actually own their learning, to start to build ownership over what do I have to do to be successful to master that concept in a competency-based environment. And there's huge technology advances right now, such as adaptive learning and so forth, that is leveraging data in this world to make it actually actionable, whether it's recommending the next learning activity for the learner or the teacher, or actually pointing you to it in a more directed way. And similarly, we're seeing huge advances in the technology itself, just as you would expect any disruptive innovation to do. From game-based learning to simulations to the abilities to communicate online to content becoming far more engaging, content shifting, quite frankly, to mobile phones, the ability to have synchronous, asynchronous, and other experiences. We're seeing huge advances right now in this field that really is driving this forward in some pretty exciting ways toward personalizing. And it brings up a very key question, which is what's the best use of face-to-face time as we're able to personalize learning in this way? And I would submit it's not doing what I'm doing right now, which is lecturing, but instead thinking about the faculty member as a mentor, a learning coach, a facilitator of rich Socratic discussions or deep projects and experiences, tutoring students one-on-one or in small groups with where they get stuck, evaluating learning in much richer, deeper ways, counseling students about a lot of the non-academic problems that may be tripping them up or helping them find what really are your passions and what do you want to do as you leave these institutions. And we're seeing a lot of interesting online competency-based universities emerge, like Western Governors University, Southern New Hampshire's College for America, and others, that are really thinking, how do we disaggregate the role of the faculty member to think really around a team of people that support learners? So we may have content experts, mentors and learning coaches, assessment specialists, instructional designers, even practitioners who we actually take from industry. They continue to hold a job but are actually involved in giving some of the credits and competencies of the course itself in much more intermixed, active ways. And the last point about this is that this disaggregation, I think, can be really important because online learning is not inherently better, as you can hear from my comments, right? And if you just simply take a face-to-face experience online, so this is an example from BYU, Idaho, where you can see out of a 6-point scale, the average was 5.6, roughly a bell curve of student engagement and learning. And when they went online, the course quality actually initially declined because the faculty members didn't know how to do instructional design in this new medium and experience. Adding in an instructional designer boosted the quality of the course and really tightened the bell curve around the student experiences. Okay? What's interesting about that, though, as well, is that you did lop off the really high-end experiences. Like the best of online could not replicate the best of face-to-face. That may stay that way for a long, long, long time. Okay? I'm not even sure it'll ever change, right? The best in-person small group experience. But the point is, for the majority of learners who don't always get that benefit of that in-person experience, it greatly improved their learning on average. Okay? So really worth thinking about that. The second thing it did is access and equity. And what I mean by that is regardless of which college you attended, you could have access to the best courses at any college around, say, in Canada, right? No longer is geography a barrier. And then the last thing that people are using this for is cost control, meaning the cost of the underlying expenditures of colleges have gone up a lot over recent years. And the question you can start to ask yourself is, what do we have to uniquely do in person, and what can we leverage online learning so that we can stem the rate of increase of that cost? Okay? Put another way, though I think that's maybe more provocative as well, is the best way to personalize learning in the past was to have a tutor for every single student. That's just been prohibitively expensive, except for those at the very, very high end. How can we leverage online learning to provide that personal experience that only a tutor could at a cost that we can actually afford? I think it's a huge opportunity as a result. Now, you hear a lot about unbundling coming to post-secondary education. And this is where I want to start to shift from what is possible in the pedagogy to some of the developments that are actually happening on the ground. And I'm going to push through the theory for a moment, just for time's sake, so we can get to more questions and answers. But, well, questions anyway. We'll see if I give answers. But basically in every industry, what you see is that the early products and services, in an effort to become good enough such that customers will want to use them, they have to basically wrap their hands around the whole problem, if you will, and build what is a very proprietary interdependent architecture, meaning the way one part works and functions impacts the way another part works and functions, and vice versa, in unpredictable ways. So if you want to optimize the performance of those early products and services, you've got to wrap your hands around the whole enterprise so you can be making those adjustments as you're building the future, in essence. Okay? Now, IBM mainframes would be a classic example of a proprietary interdependent architecture. To make the first computers good enough for people to use them, IBM couldn't just assemble and sell the mainframes. They also had to build the logic circuitry, the core memory, all the parts and functions inside of those mainframes to optimize that performance. Okay? There's a trade-off, though, to interdependent architectures. And that is, interdependent architectures, while they maximize raw functionality, there's customization in that world is prohibitively expensive. And what I mean by that is Microsoft Windows is an intricately interdependent architecture. If you were to just go in and say, I want my customized version of Microsoft Windows, and just delete 10 lines of code at random that you did not particularly like, the whole operating system would crash. And not just because it's Microsoft Windows, but because those 10 lines of code interact in very intricately interdependent ways with the rest of the code, such that if you wanted your own customized version, you'd have to actually re-architect the entire thing, which would cost you, in essence, in excess of $500 million, right? Now, you contrast this with a modular architecture, where the parts fit together in very well understood and defined ways. There are standard interfaces between them, such that parts can be plug-and-play compatible, okay? This optimizes affordable customization. There's a trade-off in raw performance, but you can quickly assemble different parts of a system to get a very affordably produced, customized application. So Dell Personal Computer in the 1990s would be the obvious counterexample to the IBM mainframes, where for those of you who remember, if you peeled the cover off an a Dell Personal Computer, you'd see that they didn't make any of the parts inside. And what that enabled you to do as a customer was jump on the Dell website and just quickly say, I want this much memory, I want this type of Seagate drive, this type of monitor, this type of processor, this much speed, et cetera. And they would quickly just snap these parts together that fit together in very well understood ways and ship you out an affordable desktop computer, okay? Now, what's interesting is that general purpose products tend to get disrupted on a job-by-job basis as they start to overshoot, and we can modularize the components. So this afternoon, or excuse me, at lunch, we heard the deputy minister talk about the disruption of newspapers, and indeed, newspapers were disrupted. But the reality is that we hired newspapers for many different jobs in our lives, not simply to become well-informed, but also to unload stuff that we no longer wanted, to find and buy cars, to sell or buy homes, to find the right job, to kill commuting time productively in mass transit, on and on and on. And it wasn't just Google and blogs, therefore, that disrupted newspapers, but it was those things, plus, as the deputy minister said, Craigslist, Autotrader.com, Realtor.com, Monster.com, the Metro newspapers that some of you may remember in New York City that all of a sudden came along and were only like 10 pages with clipped articles, but were perfect for the length of a subway ride in those places. All of these things together conspired to unbundle and disrupt newspapers, okay? And what's interesting is I would say the unwind at the end of the day job, or that Sunday newspaper, whatever else, that actually still has somewhat of a market, and it's still sort of kicking along, even as we've seen lots of disruption in other parts of that enterprise, which has really gutted that newspaper world. Similarly, Harvard Business School has been feeling this pressure. So the 2-year MBA has gone up in price year over year over year to now it's excess of $150,000 for the 2-year MBA. And there's only a limited number of employers that can actually hire people who need to make a certain amount of money to repay their loans to be able to go there. So Harvard MBAs don't really go to operating companies anymore. They all go to VC jobs and Google and places like that where they hope that they can make $1 million and repay these things. And underneath them, you would say there's been a limited disruption from part-time MBAs and online garbage, of course. But the real big disruption is actually occurring in that area of non-consumption in the outer circles among corporate universities that have been popping up. And what I mean by that is there's lots of reasons you could hire business education, more broadly speaking, and corporate universities have started at the bottom of the stack and gotten better and better over time. So from help me solve just a simple little problem on the spot and compliance issues and things like that, to the skills to become a great general manager, give me the credentials that I need to get the next job, help me even switch careers, and you start to see these things going up market. And it's not the MBA that directly competes with these things, but Harvard's executive education program is actually where they make all of their money to support the MBA program, which, hard to believe, at $150,000 is actually subsidized by executive education. And so as a result of this, you're starting to see that a lot of business education is at risk as corporations, not satisfied with the quality of exec ed programs that these institutions are creating for them and the specificity with which they're matching their needs, are themselves integrating backwards to do the training themselves. And so for a long time, you saw this integration, this rise of the corporate university, things like Motorola University and so forth. And what's interesting, I would say, is over the last maybe 10 years, it's been flipping back to where corporations are saying, we don't really want to do the training ourselves. And so they've been creating these targeted partnerships with various universities and polytechnics and colleges and so forth. So in the United States, Bellevue University does all the continuing education for the mid-level managers at Home Depot and Verizon and places like that. And Walmart has a partnership with American Public University, for example. All that to say is I think that creates a lot of opportunities for polytechnics to partner directly with industry, but it also is the case that all these companies that I've just put behind me, these new kids on the block, are coming in this marketplace to try to do that education job themselves. And I'll end here by just going through 3 slides about some of these new players and some thoughts about this. The first is these are the sort of threatening ones, I would say. Udacity and Udemy started in sort of this MOOC space, but have quickly pivoted away from MOOCs to be online learning providers that work with industry practitioners to build very specific courses for the skill sets that would-be employees need, and then give micro-credentials to help these people get hired by the industry themselves. Udacity, just as an example, works directly with AT&T, Google, Facebook, and they've set up what I think of as sort of an alternative accrediting body called the Open Education Alliance, that basically has these employers blessing the education coming from a Udacity, which gives it a certain credibility, if you will, for a student wondering where do I get access to skills that will allow me get into these IT industries. Lynda.com and LinkedIn we heard about, again, from the Deputy Minister earlier. These are partnerships that employers are quite literally taking into their existing companies to continue to skill up their existing workforce, where before they might have had to send these people back out into a polytechnic or other experience for a year master's or something like that. Dev Bootcamp and General Assembly represent sort of the beginning, I would say, of these coding boot camps that are emerging across the world right now. They started with coding, 10-week basically experiences to make you a viable coder, to get you a job in industry. General Assembly will claim that it has something like a 98 or 99% placement rate into industry. There's maybe 7 or 8 of these boot camps that are now expanding past just basic coding and IT jobs and skill sets to think much more broadly about project management in particular verticals and so forth. And I think you're going to see these experiences, these sort of 10-week sprints that create a very targeted credential, targeted to particular industry. You're going to see these things increase. And they're really blended experiences. They leverage online learning for the learning, but they do it in co-working spaces where these students get unbelievable ability to network with other students, solve real problems and experiences, and then network with other employers who are actually often leasing space out of these co-working spaces as well, which both improves the practicality of the education, and it also improves the chances of getting a job on the other end as you can show your utility with these employers as you're networking. LearnUp is a really interesting new startup out of San Francisco, a few years old. The founder of it, she spent 6 months in unemployment lines trying to understand why these people were unemployed and why the work-study programs that in the United States the federal government was providing was not helping them get jobs, and realized that there was a huge mismatch among what entry-level, in many cases, retail jobs and so forth wanted, and what the training was actually preparing them for, and created online programs to address that gap, and now has direct partnerships with companies like Safeway and Staples and so forth to train up literally thousands and thousands of people for these entry-level jobs. You can bet that she'll go up market, the founder will go up market over time and won't just be doing entry-level. The Guild is similarly focused on quote-unquote middle skills jobs, whether it's health nurse practitioners, IT people in health industries, and things like that, for which there's a great upward mobility once you get started in the industry. So those are some of the threats that I think are emerging to these education. Some of the opportunities is that there's a corresponding whole set of new players emerging that are their sole existence is to help higher education really make these innovations and do a lot of the things that we talked about in the first half of the talk. So 2U academic partnerships, for example, represented the first of the online program managers, OPMs, that would partner with colleges to help them move programs online. Noodle Partners, where full disclosure, I'm a board member, has come into the market more recently and said, rather than take 40% or 50% of your revenues as we do that with you, we'll act much more like a Dell and basically help you custom assemble the different parts that you want from out on the marketplace to build an affordable online program, or to take a campus program and start to blend it in ways that are useful for what you're trying to get done. Intellus Learning is one of these partners that it might work with, where Intellus basically is a company that has a semantic search engine, and so it can take a faculty member's learning objectives from their course, comb through 11 repositories of open content, all the digital resources that a university might license, and match a series of basically through a search engine of content objects that a faculty member might use and then go through and choose to align with those course objectives to quickly build online or digital courses, and then can monitor the student engagement on the back end of that to see what's actually working or not. Fidelis Education is much more concerned with the learning relationships. New company called the Learning Relationship Management Company that's basically, think of it like a Facebook for mentorship and putting teams around your learners, basically under the hypothesis that it's not just what you learn, but who you know and how you help build your networks at colleges that really get you ahead in life and really help colleges put supports around their learners to help get these things done. Burning glass technologies is something that is both fueling the people that are trying to upset and threaten colleges, but also help fueling colleges themselves. I know that in Canada, a big question is labor market information and getting real-time access to it. This is effectively what Burning Glass does. They literally absorb the world's job postings and match it up with educational programs to help understand what educational programs are training people for certain job openings and how you actually, what competencies underlying it do you need to build for. So as you think about new program creation or aligning programs to particular job needs, they're a huge engine underlying that and helping people. And then Smartly I put up here because my sense is that the US and Canada and Europe have been very obsessed over online learning on the desktop and not thinking as much about how this is going to change as it moves to the mobile form factor that you all carry around with you. But in developing countries in particular, this is going to be a highly disruptive trend, and it will come here as well. And Smartly is probably the most engaging thing I've personally ever learned on, actually, period. It's the fastest, most efficient way to learn that I've experienced. And it's not maybe deep learning where you'd want to get into an experience or a project, but it's ideally built for a mobile form factor. And if you can imagine that delivering the basic knowledge of a course and then using the faculty members at a Polytechnic to actually do the experiential learning and the real meat of a course that separates a graduate from a Polytechnic from just someone who's read a book, you can really imagine some pretty exciting ways, I think, to partner and create new pedagogical experiences. And they just partnered with Georgetown University to do that for their MBA program. So I think there's going to be some pretty interesting things that emerge. Last thought, and then hopefully we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A. which is that I think colleges and universities across the world right now are doing a lot of this interesting disruptive innovation themselves. And so I've put just two traditional, they're called universities, but they're more the equivalent of a polytechnic, Southern New Hampshire, Northern Arizona University in the United States, that really are pioneering these online competency-based approaches. And in each and every case, they've done so by creating that autonomy to really help faculty members have the space to rethink what teaching and learning can and should look like for this new era. And they're leveraging, and actually I think probably among the most successful innovators in this field. And so the new kids in the block, as far as I'm concerned, don't have to be these people from Silicon Valley that have never thought about education until they got out of their job that was helping them increase the clicks on an advertisement. But instead, all the expertise that resides among faculty members at the Polytechnics that have been thinking deeply about how you align experiences with employer needs and really thinking about how do we create these opportunities. From my way of thinking, it's just a huge opportunity to innovate and leverage those great resources if you can create the right structures to take these technologies and pedagogies and things that we're learning about how we learn to really just accelerate what you've been doing already and do it even better. So I think the opportunity right now is enormous for innovation, and I'm excited to once again be at Humber to talk about this, and hopefully we get a couple minutes for Q&A. Absolutely. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nobina Robinson. I'm CEO of Polytechnics Canada. Welcome to the wider group and participants of our annual conference here at Humber. It's going to be my job to moderate a few Q&As and then say thank you to Michael Horn. There are two mics down here. With this many faculty and educators in the room, I do believe that there must be something that struck a chord, though I have to tell you, Michael, we've had people working and they left the hotel at 7:15, so you might be standing between them and some drink. But let me see if there are any questions for Michael.
Questions or pushback?
Yes, here we go.
Thank you. Claude Brûlé, Algonquin College. I wonder if we can speak only about higher ed when really education is a continuum from birth, and if you believe in lifelong learning really forever. So talking about disruption only in higher ed, I wonder if we should be talking about disruption in elementary and secondary, because the children we inherit to a large extent come to us having gone through two other stages of learning.
Yeah.
And if there's no disruption in their education, what can we hope to achieve disrupting the third or tertiary level?
Terrific question. So, and I agree with you. I think arbitrarily dividing the world, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, et cetera, is a category error at the end of the day. And even thinking about college as this experience we go to for a couple years and never again return to or something like that is an error as well, because really I think lifelong learning is our journey as we continue to seek fulfilling lives and also continue to stay relevant for the workforce in both strands. So entirely agree with the question. What you don't know about me is I spend about 40 or 50% of my life thinking about the K-12 world, and there's rampant disruption occurring in the way we teach and learn. And I've spent a lot of time actually in Canada talking to schools about that as well. I think it will look different, whereas you're actually seeing new institutions emerge in many cases at the post-secondary level. Most of the disruption within developed countries is occurring of the classroom itself. And so in blended learning environments, and in the United States, for example, right now, 75% of school districts are doing blended learning. We estimate roughly 9 or 10 million students are having at least part of their day impacted by this. And policy is wrestling to try to move into a competency-based world. We are not there by any means. There's a new book, though, The End of Average by Todd Rose, that I'd highly recommend to people, that I think will further push policymakers in Canada and the US to start thinking about this world. And there's some pretty exciting experiments in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine around moving to competency-based environments. I think the push is going to be from both sides. So industry, I think, and colleges are going to be pushing us to innovate because they can really define sort of what the target is in some ways, which causes us to really think about how do we educate everyone for this knowledge economy. And then on the bottom end up, you know, kids entering kindergarten, for example, who already know their numeracy and can read in 3 languages because they learned it from an iPad, are going to beg the question of what is the teacher doing teaching them the letter A again. And I think a lot of the ADHD and stuff like that that gets diagnosed might, you know, there might be a connection. And so once you've experienced that, I think it's going to have a ripple effect up as well. So I think it's going to come from both directions, and will be disruptive in a different sense of the word as a result. Yeah, it's a great question.
Another question? How nice to see you. Thank you for coming.
I guess I have 2 questions. One, the key to Clayton's disruption analysis is that the disruptor has a different customer base.
Yes.
From the incumbent. And then as the functionality for the lower customer base improves, then the others. Who's the customer in the higher education one?
Yeah.
And I think it's moving faster in the US because it costs more.
Yep.
Which I think you alluded to. So
Yep.
that's my first question, if you can just talk to that. And the second, have you applied your analysis to the policy world? In Canada, our federal government's writing a new innovation strategy. They want to improve the innovation economy. They're just starting to wake up to the importance of polytechnics and colleges. They've been pumping billions of dollars in universities, getting nowhere with it. Have you looked at that whole policy question and the disruption that may or may not happen, and if it can't happen, why?
Yeah, both great questions. So on the first one, yes. So Clayton's the theory very much depends on finding this non-consumption, right? People who've been locked out of the market not because they're bored, but because they literally can't afford or access, right? And so that can be non-consuming contexts. And the example I give on that is mobile phones are deeply disruptive to laptops, not because a lot of us didn't have access to computers per se, but because there were contexts in our lives where we were unable to have that communication. And that looks equally unappealing often to an incumbent who thinks, university, for example, a degree is 4 years. That's what a degree, it's 4 years. We defined it as 4 years, right? And so that looks unattractive, which probably explains the second point as well to a degree. So the price piece, I think, is a reason why in the United States, you're right, it's happening faster, and it's why I wonder, you know, will it actually happen with new entrants in Canada, or will it be the Polytechnics and others that actually lead this? I think that's a very plausible scenario. The one question I would have, and this relates to your second one, is that a lot of times policymakers err in thinking about cost just as the cost to student rather than the total cost. And the reason I say that is, like, if you look in Europe, more broadly, the cost to educate students has gone up over time. In industries without disruption, cost tends to increase faster than inflation. And because European governments have not been able to continue to fund their public universities at that rate over time, you know, Germany 150 years ago was literally, you know, if you looked at the top 10 universities, they were 8 or 9 of them, right? Now you look, Germany, like its highest is maybe number 50 or something like that. Oxford and Cambridge are not what they once were. And so I think it's important to be thinking more holistically about expenditures. And that's why I think a lot of times in the United States, I'll be direct here, I think the free community college movement that's popping up in the United States would actually have a very detrimental impact on innovation in that sector, because it would ignore the fact that actually community colleges cost 4 or 5 times more than what tuition is in many of those environments. So I don't know exactly how that, I haven't thought about exactly how that plays out in the Canadian landscape, but I think it's important to think about that overall piece, because governments are the funder and the customer in some ways. Last point on the second question, and then take the last one, I guess. Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about policy. You know, it's tricky. I thought the deputy minister did a good job today of saying governments don't create disruption, but they can create maybe enabling conditions that help foster productive dollars to go to productive places. And I tend to think that when we understand the outcomes that we want, and we fund on outcomes rather than inputs, and the number of libraries and books and PhDs that there has to be, as opposed to just saying like, hey, we want students that get great jobs and do great things in society, you get more innovation when you fund the latter. And so the more you can create opportunities, I think, to think about the outcomes you want, as opposed to a university looks like this, and therefore post-secondary all looks like this, which I think is what the government probably suffers from, the better off you are, I think, as a sector. So, yeah.
Thanks. Hopefully this question carries on
Great.
Right where that one was.
Okay.
You made the great point about the hotel market for
Yeah.
a long time not being disrupted until a sufficient technology driver, Airbnb, totally flips it. In the beginning of some of the work that Clayton Christensen and Henry Eyring did on the Innovative University, they talk about how come these things don't disrupt, and partly it's because the customers, or at least the governments that own them, don't let them die.
Yes.
We heard eloquently from the deputy minister at lunch, don't expect that these things will be allowed to die.
Yeah.
Where do you see the technological flipping point is where the new disruptive models will actually cause that cratering to occur?
Yeah, so I don't know completely. I think it's an interesting question. And in the United States context, I think the small private liberal arts colleges, for example, they're very part of those market forces and will, even though Sweetbriar College, for example, those of you who don't know, small private liberal arts college in Virginia that served women, effectively went out of business only to be resuscitated by alumni who wanted it to stay in business. And I would say very unclear that it will still be in business 10 years from now. Like the market forces, I think, are still sticky there. What's different, I think, about higher education from a lot of the other sectors Clayton has studied is that alumni, in many ways, are the ongoing customers of an experience because of the social and network value it continues to accrue to them. So I have a very deep interest in Harvard Business School not being disrupted, because it will reflect negatively on my ability to be gainfully employed and so forth. So I think that is a slowing effect that is not necessarily unique, but or kills it, but I think it greatly slows it down, such that the flip occurs over much longer time horizons. To the broader point on publics, then, I think that's right. It's not clear to me that a lot of these institutions go out of business, but more that they disrupt class rather than disrupt the school itself. And so the disruption, the unit of disruption might be in the way we do teaching and learning as opposed to the institution disappearing or something like that. Last thought on that, which is that disruption isn't a theory of life or death, right? It's a theory of being at the top of your game versus being middling in some ways. Laughter. So the only reason I say that is because I think a lot of people sort of think like, oh, you're disrupted and then you die. A lot of those companies hang around. I mean, GM's still here. They're just not really that great. It doesn't mean that disruption didn't happen to them. And so, Clayton's work got attacked a few years ago in the New Yorker with an article by Jill Lepore. Okay. And I think she made a huge error in so doing of saying like, well, this business is still around. That's not evidence of the force of disruption or not impacting a sector. And all that to say, I think, had it been a technological enabler, we would have called what happened in the German universities over the last 150 years. Things do change in higher education, even if institutions perpetuate. So I think teaching and learning, when we come back here in 15 years, will look very different, even though I expect Humber to still be here and thriving. So
I have a question, because there are people here who aren't educators, but people here who represent organizations of employers. You mentioned burning glass.
Yeah.
And you mentioned labor market information, and some people know that that's a hobby horse of mine. In the US, is burning glass seen as a credible source of LMI by government policymakers? By parents?
By government? No.
By parents? By guidance counselors?
Yeah, so let me answer the question. Parents and guidance counselors don't think about the question you just asked at all in the United States. They don't actually think about labor market information at all, so they wouldn't even know how to think about it. They're certainly not looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the United States government. Okay. Nor are they looking at Burning Glass, but Burning Glass isn't making that information public to those audiences either. They are working directly with post-secondary institutions and employers who find it way more useful than what the federal government has been cranking out. So yes, does the federal government acknowledge it? No, but I wouldn't expect them to. Right. And so my sense of it is these were entrepreneurs who said, we can't wait forever for the government to give us the information we need. We need to somehow seed a partner that does it for us because, God, we need this information.
Yeah. We may find ourselves in a similar position here in Canada.
Yeah.
I think it's a conversation that's only just getting going. Well, folks, on behalf of Polytechnics Canada and our host college here, Humber, and everyone in attendance, I'd like to thank Michael for sharing so many insights with us. I think you've got us thinking about the potential disruptive innovations that may be heading to our educational space. It was also striking to consider how many of the disruptions that you mentioned, when you look at it in a Canadian context, were either initiated by Polytechnics or we are early adopters of them. So I think there's something, but not about resting on our laurels, but we can feel encouraged. And that was the Learning That Works theme that we've sort of, I hope we've had some learning. I know we've worked very hard, and I'm really glad, Michael, for your insights. We have a few gifts to say thank you. A nice innovation from a Humber industrial design student, which you'll read about. His name is Lee Renshaw, and he's very entrepreneurial, and a few little Canadian gifts for you to take back to Boston. Everyone, please join me in thanking Michael Horn. Thank you. And now, we turn to the easy part of our event, the networking, the mingling, with our many student entrepreneurs who have now set up, there's quite an entrepreneurial alley for you to see. I would like to ask or point out that we have someone here, a sponsor, Gina Van Dalen of ITAC, the Information Technology Association of Canada. She has a table out there. She's been very kind to sponsor parts of our event over today and tomorrow. And if you would like to know more about the Business Technology Management Program, please see Gina. She's right there. For those of you who've been here all day, let's go back to the new building, the Learning Resource Commons. And there's lots to drink and eat. And in about an hour, we should, there's no snow, so we should get easy landing at Pearson, and some words to us from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science. For those of you who've just joined us, student ambassadors will take you to where the drink is, and the plan is that there will be a bus going back to the hotel at 7:15 sharp. If you need a taxi, please see our team, and we'll find you to the information desk. And for our GTA friends, it'll be home before 9, I hope. Thank you very much. See you for drinks.